Andrew McCutchen talked to Pittsburgh media for the first time since becoming a Texas Ranger on Tuesday. And if you thought he was going to have a lot to say, or even really much of anything to say, you might want to temper those expectations a bit. Good morning, and welcome to OffBeat here on North Shore 9, presented by FanDuel. My name is Alex Stumpf. This is a daily look at your Pittsburgh Pirates. You might not be able to tell from this, very basic-looking room, but I am in Arlington, Texas. I tried to get a good baseball backdrop photo, and sat in the seats. There are leaf blowers going, and people who felt very compelled to see someone talking to a laptop, tell them that leaf blowers were going. Like I didn't know, but okay. I went to the press box. I'm like, we'll record here. The vending machine or the soda machine sounded like it was about to explode. So we are going here into this nondescript room that is quiet, and I promise we'll come up with a better shooting location for tomorrow. But maybe it's best that it's quiet so we can just really focus on this moment, this interview with Andrew McCutchen, where not a whole lot was said. Andrew McCutchen was an opponent for the first time since 2022. Whenever he returned to the Pirates in 2023 and there was this homecoming, there was this belief, this optimism, this hope that is like, okay, he is going to retire a Pirate. He expressed that at different times. The organization expressed that at different times. And you look at 2023 and the step they took forward that year and be like, yeah, that makes sense. And even though, he partially tore his Achilles, it's like, it's a pretty easy decision. You still bring him back. 2024 has a good offensive season. The team stagnates, but, there's still some level of hope for the following year. 2025 was a frustrating year for a lot of people. And Andrew McCutchen's production dipped. And we talked a whole lot in the last episode of how we kind of got here, but it got to the point that the organization and the franchise icon had some level of frustration with each other. And at least based on my understanding of what was going on this winter, bringing him back was never a top priority. Not saying that there was no chance of him coming back last winter, but it always felt like they're probably going to move on type situation. And that's tough because even though Andrew McCutchen, as a player, as a contributor, is not the player that he was in even 2023, he is still one of the most important players in the history of the franchise. He is still one of the greatest players in the history of the franchise. And for a team that, even after a frustrating loss on Tuesday, is 13-10, talented young group with a better offense, obviously a great young pitching staff, there is some level of optimism that, like, hey, this team could break through. They could make the postseason. That was the goal coming into the year, period, full stop. So it's a very important year, a year that they've gotten off to a pretty good start in, and he's not a part of it. There's a lot to ask. And there's a lot I was hoping to get some level of answers from. McCutchen didn't have a whole lot to say. In the middle of the interview, there was a 3-question sequence that I think kind of nailed it all, and I think all 3 of these questions are very important questions and questions that needed to be asked and questions that if I was just a reader, I would want to know. And it was, first, was there a level of disappointment in him not being able to return to Pittsburgh? McCutchen's response, quote, "I'd rather not answer that question," end quote. I followed by asking, where does he view his relationship with the organization? And if he could envision himself suiting up for them, or whenever he retires, would there be any, I will admit, if you check the clip that I put on Twitter, uh, I didn't finish the question. I was searching for the perfect final word. I don't think the final word would have changed the response, which was, quote, "I don't know. I guess you'd have to ask them." And then followed up, "What was communication like with the organization?" To which he said, "I'd rather not answer that question." I will say, though, he was asked, immediately after, what was it like to, see Don Kelly again? He's like, "Yeah, it was cool." And then, quote, "I haven't talked to him since last season," end quote. If he hadn't talked to the manager during the offseason, I think that might tip the hand a little bit on, uh, what the level of communication. Not saying that it would all go through Don Kelly or anything like that, but that not hearing from the manager, I think is a little telling. I get this is still very frustrating. I mean, we're only a couple months removed from Pirates Fest, whenever he made it pretty open how he was disappointed that he was not a part of Pirates Fest. And then shortly after, he changes his, uh, social media profile from pirate logo to, his logo, and it 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 wasn't the messiest of breakups, at least, perceived, but like I said, you can tell there was some hurt. And I could also say that I don't think he was really eager to talk to media types. I don't necessarily blame him for that, but, uh, we struck out, the traveling media struck out just, getting him pregame, so that was a postgame interview. In postgame where he didn't play, he's mostly a short side platoon, it looks like now for the Rangers. Maybe that can change. He has played a little bit of outfield defense. Uh, maybe the DH reps change. Who knows? That's speculation for a beat that I don't know, for a team that I don't know that well. Nobody really wanted that messy of a divorce, and I personally believe there is a path to m making this right and reconciling differences down the road. I don't know if that's as a player. I don't know if that's after he eventually retires, whether it's after this year or 27 or 28 or whatever, but that's just speculation, and I probably shouldn't do any right now because he just flat out didn't wanna touch the 3 of those questions, and he was asked at the end, following rephrasing to my questions, like, to paraphrase a little bit, can he and the organization make up whenever he retires? Because his legacy is important. It is important for telling the story of the Pittsburgh Pirates. He responded with, quote, "We'll see." He was asked a follow-up of, "What would you need from them?" Said, quote, "I don't know. I haven't thought of that." End quote. I would buy that he hadn't thought of that. I mean, that's a good question. It's also a tough one to have that thrown at you right there. What did he actually talk about? Okay, well, he talked about how he liked the opportunity in Texas, how he's still in the major leagues, how he's still learning at age 39. He was asked if there were emotions with this, and he's like, "It's not as emotional as the first time," whenever the Pirates traded for him. I mean, this was a very different type of way of the organization not employing his services, but this isn't the first time that he has been through this before. He did see some teammates on the field. It was cool to see him, do that. It was cool to see him see, just some Pirate fans who are on the field pregame, dap up some kids and sign a McCutchen Pirates jersey. And then he was asked about how, hey, this is a potentially good Pirates team. And there are some people who are upset that, this team doesn't have you being a part of it. And, he took the high road. He said, it's great for them. They made a conscious effort to find ways to better themselves, and they executed. He always maintained that he didn't come back to Pittsburgh just to be here. He came back to win, to be a part of it. This is the best start this team has been off to since, 2023, whenever they started off, 29, and that was just so unsustainable. But, it was kind of like a little bit of a fever dream, especially after O'Neal breaks his ankles. And Justice De Los Santos wrote a great story then about how, Cutchen, Carlos Santana, after that injury, they kind of stood up and they're like, hey, guys, a lot of season, let's do this. And I think that's what a lot of people hoped, this whole second stint was going to be. And it didn't end up being that. It doesn't tarnish the legacy. It doesn't do anything like that. But my read on it is it wasn't what either side all hoped it was going to be. I mean, McCutchen stated multiple times during that second stint how he wanted to retire a Pirate. He also said in 25 that he wanted to keep playing in 2026, and that's fine. I mean, he should have agency of when he calls it a career. He's earned it. It just wasn't a great fit for both sides anymore. And if there is some awkwardness, some hurt, McCutchen didn't want to air it out on a Tuesday night in Arlington. I don't fault him for that. But this story isn't over. It's going to be there in, maybe it's not resolved in 2026. Maybe it's not resolved in 2027 or 28 or 30 or whenever. But at some point, he and the organization are going to have to hash out whatever is left to hash out. And I'm not putting that expectation on him. I'm not putting that, based on the organization, but it's just the two sides are too important to each other for it to end with just things not being said. That, just both sides just swallowing their words. For now, that's fine. I'm still glad I made the trip. I'm still glad I was there to get the non-answers, because I thought this was going to be one of the more important interviews of the year. And even if there wasn't a whole lot that was actually said, sometimes through omission you can say a lot. Thank you so much for listening to OffBeat here on North Shore 9, presented by FanDuel. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe wherever you find a podcast, or if you want to see me on YouTube in this nondescript Severance-looking room. I haven't seen Severance. Maybe I'm off on that. It's on the watch list, don't worry. But thank you so much for listening. We'll talk again tomorrow from Arlington.
All right, that wraps up this episode of North Shore 9. Thanks so much for tuning in, whether you're listening on the podcast or catching us on YouTube. If you enjoyed the show, please give this video a thumbs up, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. It really helps us grow. And if you're listening on the podcast, a quick review goes a long way in helping others find the show. Plus, be sure to tell a friend about us. There's always room for more here in the NS9 community. And for those looking to support us a little more, consider joining our Patreon, become an MVP member, and get exclusive perks while helping us continue to bring you more of the Pirates content you love. Thanks again for all your support, and let's go Bucks.